Imagine standing at the base of the Wasatch Mountains in 1935. The ground beneath your feet is just dirt. It is a battleground where the Union Pacific Railroad is fighting a war against physics. You hear it before you see it, a low, rhythmic thunder echoing off the canyon walls, getting louder, angrier, until the ground shakes so violently you think it's an earthquake. But it's not the earth moving, it's a train, and it is struggling. This stretch of track, specifically the 65 miles of twisting, tortuous steel climbing out of Ogden, Utah, was the nightmare of every railroad engineer in America. It was the bottleneck of the transcontinental line, a steep 1.14% grade that strangled commerce and humiliated the most powerful engines of the day. At the time, Union Pacific was desperate. The Great Depression was easing, freight tonnage was skyrocketing, and war clouds were gathering in Europe, promising a demand for supplies like the world had never seen. To conquer the Wasatch, Union Pacific turned to their best engineers and demanded a miracle. They got the Challenger. Introduced in 1936, the Challenger locomotive was a beast in its own right, a massive 4664, articulated steam engine designed to be faster and more agile than anything before it. It was a technological marvel, capable of speeds that terrified crews and pulling power that should have been sufficient for any railroad on Earth. But here is the shocking truth that Union Pacific management refused to accept. The Challenger wasn't enough. Despite being one of the largest steam locomotives ever built, when it hit that specific crushing grade in Utah with a heavy war train, it choked. It needed help. It needed helper engines to push from behind, slowing down operations and clogging the lines. To the ambitious bosses at Union Pacific, the Challenger was a light engine, a disappointment. They didn't want a fast Greyhound. They wanted a monster. Call to action. We are about to see the birth of the big boy. But do you think Union Pacific was right to give up on the Challenger so quickly? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if you prefer raw power or high speed. In 1941, the ground shook again, but this time, the sound was different. It wasn't the struggle of a Challenger. It was the dominance of the big boy, the Union Pacific 4000 class. The big boy was a machine that defied logic. It was 132 feet long, weighed over 1,000,000 pounds, and hinged in the middle just to get around curves. When it hit the Wasatch grade, it didn't ask for permission. It simply took the mountain. The big boy could drag a freight train that was 5 miles long up a steep hill at a steady crawl, consuming coal and water at a rate that would bankrupt a small nation. For the duration of World War II, the big boy was the undisputed king. It was the poster child of American industrial might, the brute force that moved the tanks and guns that won the war. However, while the public and the press were obsessed with the big boy's sheer size, something interesting was happening on the rest of the railroad network. The disappointing Challengers were quietly doing something the big boy could unteed. They were running everywhere. You see, the big boy had a fatal flaw hidden in its massive frame. It was too big. It was so heavy that it crushed the rails of lesser tracks, meaning it was trapped, leashed to that one specific mountain range in Utah and Wyoming. It was a prisoner of its own power. The Challenger, on the other hand, was the perfect balance. It was fast, capable of hitting 70 miles per hour, while the big boy wheezed at 40. It was versatile. It could haul heavy freight in the morning and a high-speed passenger train in the afternoon, something the big boy was rarely trusted to do. As the war ended and the 1950s rolled in, the railroad began to realize that biggest didn't mean best. The big boys were coal-hungry dinosaurs in a world rapidly turning to diesel. They were expensive to maintain and inflexible to use. Meanwhile, the little Challengers were racking up miles, proving to be the most efficient and effective articulated steam engines Union Pacific ever owned. They were the unsung heroes, doing the dirty work across the entire system, while the big boy got the glory for just climbing one hill. The Challenger had become the preferred engine for the crews who wanted a smoother ride and the dispatchers who needed trains to move fast. The giant was winning the headlines, but the underdog was winning the war of efficiency. But the ultimate victory for the Challenger wouldn't come in the 1950s. It would come decades later, when the fires had long gone cold and the world had forgotten the sound of a steam whistle. Call to action. The age of steam is about to end, and the fate of these two giants takes a twist you won't believe. If you're enjoying this history, please leave a like. It helps the channel faster than a Challenger on a straightaway. By 1960, the war was lost. The diesel engine had conquered the rails. The mighty big boys, once the pride of the fleet, were dragged into sidings. Some were scrapped, their metal melted down to make Toyotas and toasters. Others were stuffed into parks, cold and silent statues of a dead era. The Challengers suffered the same fate. For 20 years, the rivalry was over. The big boy had retired as the biggest, and the Challenger was just a footnote. Or so everyone thought. In 1981, a group of volunteers at Union Pacific decided to do the impossible. They wanted to bring a giant back to life, but they didn't choose a big boy. They chose a Challenger specifically, number 3985. Why? Because even in retirement, the Challenger's versatility shone through. It was easier to fix, easier to run, and could travel on more tracks than the lumbering big boy. When Challenger 3985 steamed out of the shop, it didn't just run, it conquered the world. For nearly 40 years, this was the face of American steam. It was the Challenger that roared across the plains, pulling excursions, carrying the Olympic torch, and wowing millions of people who had never seen a steam engine. During those decades, the big boy sat rusting in museums, helpless and immobile. The little brother had become the patriarch. The Challenger 3985 held the title of the world's largest operating steam locomotive for an entire generation. It proved that while the big boy had the brute force to climb a hill in 1941, the Challenger had the endurance to survive history. It beat the big boy by outliving it, by outrunning it, and by keeping the spirit of steam alive when the big boy could not. Today, the Big Boy 4014 has finally returned to steam, reclaiming its title with thunderous applause. But real historians know the truth. The Big Boy is a special event, a celebrity that comes out for parades. But the Challenger? The Challenger was the workhorse that built the railroad, the speed demon that moved the nation, and the survivor that kept the flame burning in the dark years. The Big Boy might be the king of the mountain, but the Challenger was the king of the rails. Call to action. Which locomotive do you think deserves the crown, the massive Big Boy or the versatile Challenger? Let me know your pick in the comments below. And if you want to see more stories of mechanical titans, click that video on your screen right now. I'll see you there.